Jensen here. Tonight we are going to have lamb chops with kind of boiled smashed potatoes, and we are going to bake up a cinnamon roll sourdough with our apple butter that is still reducing on our oven here. It's actually gotten our stove. It's gotten quite thick now, so we're getting pretty close to being the final product of our apple butter. And that's going to go great with our sourdough cinnamon roll bread here. So let's get this all scored up. We've got a nice little pop on it here. This one has pumpkin spice both in the base of the bread, and then when I've got a little leakage from our butter and cinnamon roll. It popped. Let me grab that. We're losing some of the goodness. No worries here. I was trying to be very careful so I wouldn't tear it, but you know what? Sometimes accidents happen. But again, we have butter, brown sugar, cinnamon swirl in here. And I've had this proofing in the oven or in the refrigerator, not the oven, for the last, since yesterday or 2 days ago. I'm just going to take off a little bit of this flour so I can spread it around. And then we're going to do, I'm always popping this guy off. I need to get one of those really good ones. I keep saying that, but I'm like, this guy works. Okay, let's get a nice, got our expansion score here. Here we go. My butter in here is firming it up because I have it in the cinnamon roll, which is making it a little bit different. And I don't think I put this on right, but that's okay. We're just not even going to use this. I'm just going to use it old school fashion, guys. Use it with my hand. Sometimes simplicity is easier than trying to use it. Here we go. Again, let's get our big score here. I'm going to just wipe up just a little bit of this oozing juice. And let's pop this in our Dutch oven. Here we go. And we're going to let this, my oven's been preheated at around 500 for the last, I will say, hour or so. So it's nice and hot. We're going to pop this in there. And we're going to bake it up. Okay. So we're going to bake this at 500 for 20 minutes, nice and hot. And then we'll take the lid off, reduce our temperature down to 450, and bake it for 20 minutes at 450. Okay. Let's get our timer set. And let's start working on our dinner. We're going to get our potatoes boiling for our smashed potatoes. And then we'll season up our lamb chops and start prepping some of our other vegetables here. So let's give this a good turn around here. Let me grab my knife because I forgot to set out my knife. Okay, so we're going to use some Yukon Gold potatoes. A lot of times for smashed potatoes, I'll use the little baby Yukons, but I just have the bigger ones today. So we're going to just quarter them. You want to leave them kind of big, not super, you don't want to cut them super small. So I'm going to keep them, either into quarters or to 6, depending on how big they are, so that they'll boil up and get tender, but I want them just tender enough that when I smash them down, they'll, smush, but still have a little bit of firmness to it. And then we'll kind of cover them with a herby garlic butter and parmesan and roast them up in the oven for the final part. Here we go. Now, you don't want to use a russet potato for this because that will just, they're just not the right texture. You want a bit of a waxier potato to make smashed potatoes. So stick with a Yukon or the baby Yukon or the niblets. All the littler ones work well for this. Here we go. And then we're going to drop these in and let them start to boil up and get nice and tender. And then we're going to season up our lamb chops. Here. Okay, Let's get them in here. I'm going to put a little bit of salt in here, not much, but I do want to season them up a little bit. We are going to be adding some salty butter on it, but just a smidge. That's going to help bring the temperature of the water up higher so that they'll get a good boil through. And then I'm going to give, again, my apple butter here. That's been reducing down. If you were with us at our lunch stream, this thing was full up to about the top with our, our apples, and then we pureed it, and then it was about halfway full, and now it is reduced down to this small part. We're about to get, I think, just a single jar. I don't like to make a huge batch at a time, but this is made with 5 big Jonathan apples and brown sugar and cinnamon and lemon juice for just a really delicious apple butter that we're going to have on our cinnamon roll sourdough. So they'll kind of, pair off together. But while we're waiting for that, we've got our lovely lamb chops here, which I love lamb chops. My kids love lamb chops. They're fun, they're cute, they're delicious. If you've never had lamb before, it's a very tender meat. It's a little bit gamey. It's not super gamey, but it definitely has a bit more gaminess than beef. But it's more tender than pork, and I want to say it's like tender like a ribeye. So it's really tender meat, and it's delicious. So I'm going to drizzle them all with a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. This is going to kind of combat with the natural fat in the lamb and help make it nice and juicy. And then I'm keeping the spices really simple. Onion powder, garlic salt, and sage. I find sage pairs really well with the gaminess of lamb. Sage has an earthy flavor and just works really well with it. I love sage and lamb. But let's first start by giving a nice little coating of onion powder. This is going to give a really great flavor to our lamb chops, not pork chops. It also allows it to get a little crispy crust on it too. We're going to do our garlic salt. Here we go. And then we're going to go in with our sage. And I will say for this, I prefer the dried sage over using fresh sage, because I find that fresh sage, you've got to really crisp it up to get rid of that kind of texture that it has. Because if you've never worked with sage before, it's a fuzzy leaf, kind of like lamb's ear. And it kind of has a fuzzy texture on it. So you have to really mince it fine, and kind of that way to work with it. Okay, let me just prep these open, because I'm going to just use my hand to kind of pat these spices out, and then I'll flip them all over, because I want that sage to kind of rub all over it, because again, the sage is just going to add a really great flavor. Okay. Let's flip these guys over, because we're going to season up both sides, because these are pretty fat little chops here, but they are delicious. Use my clean hand. We're going to do, again, a nice little drizzle of the Worcestershire. This is the main goal for the Worcestershire, is to help break down the fat in the lamb chops, keep them nice and juicy. Adds a little bit of a subtle flavor to it, but again, it really just kind of breaks down that fat. We'll do our onion powder here. And we're going to go in with our garlic salt. And again, just a nice little sprinkle over, because these are pretty fat chunks of meat. So you want to make sure you've got those edges really seasoned, because that's where all that flavor is going to come through, because this is more of a quick marinade or like a seasoning on it. Now I'm going to go over with my sage, and then I'll use my hand again to kind of make sure it gets coated and makes like a fine layer. Here we go. So I'm just going to pat it around for this. And, I will just say that lamb and sage, I feel like those are two, just that herb really complements that natural kind of gaminess of the lamb, and really mask it with that flavor.
It's a good pairing. It's like lemon and tarts.
Yes, it's like lemon and tarts. Hint, hint, somebody wants lemon tarts. Okay. Now let me go get my hands washed. Okay. We're going to slide this right over here. And then we're going to start prepping up our onion that we're going to put over with our green beans. We're going to have our chopped, our green beans and onions as one of our sides to go with our lamb chops here. So you want to use a yellow onion for this because you want it to get a nice caramelization to really bring out the lovely flavors. Sometimes when I make my green beans, I do them in the oven on a high roast, or I'll do them in my frying pan. I'm going to do these on the frying pan today because I don't want to cook them too high with the sourdough. Here we go. And with the green beans, because our green beans are long and skinny, I'm going to cut my onions long and skinny as well. There we go. Now, if you ever feel like your knife is slipping on your onions or peppers or tomatoes, those are always, I will say, my 3 that always get me. That's when I know that my knife needs to be sharpened up. Because when your knife is dull, it's more likely to slip when you're cutting your vegetables. And so if you have a to be sharpened up, because when your knife is dull, it's more likely to slip when you're cutting your vegetables. And so if you have a knife set, just use your honing steel. Because when your knife is dull, it's more likely to slip when you're cutting your vegetables. And so if you have a knife set, just use your honing steel to kind of sharpen it up, which my knife actually needs. This is your honing steel. Is much better than any of those fancy ones. So we're just going to go out and you're just going to slide your knife at an angle along your honing shear, which actually has a little bit of a texture. And as it does that, that's going to sharpen up your blade really nice. And I will say you just have to do this for like 30 seconds to a minute to get a really nice sharp thing. And then conversely, I do it with the other side to sharpen that up as well. So you ideally don't want anybody standing next to you in your kitchen while you do it, but it's really simple. And that's going to help you get. I've had my knife for 16 years and it's still great and sharp. And I probably sharpen it, I want to say like once or twice a month, but it doesn't take too long.
You have a question. Does chopping onions not bother your eyes?
So sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I find keeping my onions in the refrigerator. So I have like a refrigerator outside and then bottom drawer that keeps kind of the moisture down. It's in like a crisper drawer. Prevents it from getting into my eyes. When it's room temperature, I feel like those onion juices really get you. Now, there are times where an onion will get me that is very, very flagrant, but not all. This one's good. And I find keeping it cold as well. Apparently, there's some myth that if you have water open to it, it won't get your eyes. I don't think that's true because I've cut up onions with water and it still gets me sometimes. Let's get our butter with our garlic going. Let me grab my butter over here. Actually, forgot to set one out. This is going to be for our smashed potatoes. And I want to have it kind of infuse into the garlic and then we'll put it in there. So I'm going to melt my butter first in here and let it kind of cook up and then we'll add in our garlic for it. There we go. I think 3 tablespoons should be about good with it. I don't want too much in there because we're going to put Parmesan cheese, so it doesn't need to be very thin. But before I add my garlic in here, I want to make sure my butter melts down until we have this nice thin layer because I don't want my garlic to crisp up. I want it to infuse. Let me check on I might turn off my apple butter here because it's getting down to the thickness now. Apple butter is a delicious, it's almost as if you can see it's kind of got a thick, it holds its body now, so we're getting to the right texture. Think about applesauce that has been reduced down, that is sweeter and full of so much more flavor. This is 5 apples here. So it's hard to believe it, but I have reduced down 5 apples to this deliciousness, and I'm going to turn it off and let it sit, which will spread over our bread and will give you this lovely apple flavor. And there you do butter and then the apple butter on top of it. Amazing. Let me test my potatoes, see if they're nice and soft. And then we'll start cutting up our strawberries. I don't want to start frying up my potatoes yet or my lamb chops because they're going to take a little bit.
You have a question. Does the apple butter have any butter in
it? It does not. There's still a thing. So the apple butter does not have any butter in it. It just gets the name because you thicken it up and you're spreading it on there. But it is delicious. Let me grab my strawberries. We're going to have strawberries for dinner tonight and technically our apple butter, but my kids won't consider apple butter a fruit. They're going to consider it spread. So let me give these a quick wash. Just run them under. And then let me grab my little knife here. And we are going to kind of slice them up. Now my trick with our with strawberries, if they're not super sweet, if you're out of seasoning, I feel like our strawberries are kind of getting back into the not season time because we're getting close to the end of theirs. Sprinkle them with just a little bit of sugar, and that's going to really bring up their flavor. I'm just going to peel up and cut up a little of these to have with our dinner today. And then we'll start working on our lamb chops because we have about 5 minutes before we take the lid off. And we're going to have to do a couple batches of the lamb chops because they're not all going to fit on the one thing. So we'll get these. And then our potatoes should be nice and soft soon. And what we're going to do with our potatoes is we're going to strain them. Then we'll lay them out on a baking sheet, smush them down until they're flat. We'll cover them with our little herb butter that we're about to infuse here in just a second with some garlic and onion powder. And then we'll drizzle that over with some Parmesan cheese and let that crisp up in the oven. There we go. Now, my kids love fruit, and this is 2 pounds of strawberries, and we will probably almost go through all of our strawberries. Let's take a pause here. I've got my butter here. I'm going to turn it down now all the way to low because, again, I don't want it to be super hot. I'm going to give it a swirl around, kind of cool the temperature off and finish melting. I'm going to kind of take my pan off slightly off of my burner because I want just a residual amount of heat. So if you have electric ones, you can just move it slightly and give you a little bit of heat, but not too much. And that's always my trick when something you need to be cooked really low, just kind of take it off the burner a little bit. And let's add in our garlic here or jarlic. You could always mince up your garlic if you wanted to. That's give you a little bit stronger flavor. But for simplicity, garlic works great, especially if it's not going to be the main piece. Okay, let's give this a good stir in here. And again, I don't want it to be so hot that it's going to saute up my garlic. I want it more infused because the crisping will happen actually in the oven when we do it. We're going to add in a little bit of onion powder, about a tablespoon, because this is going to give it a nice savory flavor when it goes over. Let's give it a good stir. And then, of course, a little bit of garlic salt. We're going to add in about a teaspoon of garlic salt. There we go. And this, we're just going to let it sit over this really low heat. It's only about 1/4 of the way on my burner so that it just keeps it enough from cooling down, but it's not going to prevent it from sauteing and getting too hot. Let's get these going. Then we're going to get our oil ready to start sauteing off our pork chops. Pork chops, not pork chops, lamb chops. Earlier I was singing the lamb chops sing-along song. I don't know if got anyone who remembers that from like the early 90s. That was like big when I was really, really little, but then it kind of came out. But I do remember it, our little like sock puppet that came out. Back when you didn't have options to watching TV on the show, you know, you had very few options. Okay, we're going to do, I'll probably just stick with this much. We'll save the rest for another day. And let me grab my little bit of sugar here. Now, I add just the teensiest bit of sugar on here. It helps the strawberries sweat out their natural flavor and juices. And you don't need to add a whole lot, like less than a teaspoon. But this light dusting will really enhance your strawberry flavor without doing a lot. Okay, let's get our pan heating up here. And I'm going to turn it on. Let it start getting nice and warm. And we're going to put a little bit of olive oil in here.
Marla sent you a gift.
Well, thank you, Marla. We appreciate that. I'm going to put in about 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm going to use that much because I do have a big pan. I want just enough to kind of coat the bottom of it, but we don't need it to be drenched in it. Let's give our kind of herby butter here a little stir. go. Again, you don't want it to be scalding or cooking too much. And let me check again my potatoes. I'll know when they're ready, when I can easily push a fork through them. So almost pretty about halfway. These need about 1 more minute or so. While we're doing that, let me grab my baking sheet that we will put these on for it. And I'm going to do it straight on the baking sheet. I'm not going to lay a parchment paper down on it because I want that heat of the baking sheet to help crisp up the potatoes as well. Let's give this one last stir. Beautiful. Again, this is 5 apples that we have reduced down to, again, this delicious paste that will be our butter, apple butter. It almost reminds me of, in Tennessee, we have an amusement park here called Dollywood. And at Dollywood, at their grist mill, you can get their cinnamon bread with apple butter. And I keep saying to my kids, I was like, we're going to go there I think we're going to go, there for fall break this year. And I was like, and I'm always like, we got to get that. That's like the one stop straight there. We've got to get our cinnamon bread with our apple butter. It's so good. Okay, still need a little bit. Let's check on here. Just about hot enough to go on. Let me grab my tongs out and we can start putting these on here. Let me check my timer. You know what? We can head over there because that's about to go off. That way this will give it a little bit more to heat up. And we'll check this. Okay. I'm going to turn. We'll get all of that going. So we've cooked it for 20 minutes at 500. This is it's a pumpkin spice and cinnamon spiced loaf with a brown sugar and cinnamon swirl in the middle. So we've got this, again, this beautiful puff here. You can see that's the brown sugar and the cinnamon in there. That's going to actually kind of caramelize and crisp up lovely. Let's pop this guy in here. And I'm going to turn my temperature down to 450. And we're going to bake at 450 for 20 minutes. And this is going to give us a nice blonde crust. There we go. You don't want to have it I don't like my crust too dark because it gets really hard and crunchy, especially the next day. I know a lot of people like that really dark, crunchy crust. My Teddy will always tell me it's too hard, it hurts my mouth. So I do a nice kind of a blonde crust on it so that it's not so, like it gets more chewy instead of rock hard crunchy the next day. We're going to drop our pork chop or lamb chops in. I'm going to take my thickest ones first to start frying up. And then our second batch, we'll do our slightly thinner ones because I don't think I'll be able to get them all on here. Let's see this, guys. So we're going to start because I want them to cook evenly. So we're going to do our first 5 on here. And we're going to let them saute and kind of cook up nicely. Then we'll flip them there. Let's check our potatoes now. Again, you want to fish out your biggest potato here, your fattest one. That's what's going to let you know if it's nice and tender. Looks like my fork is pushing all the way through, so those are done. Let's strain them, and then we'll put them out. We'll smash them. We'll cover them up with our butter and a little bit of Parmesan cheese. Parmesan cheese. There we go. And then we'll work on our green beans and onions here in just a second. Ooh, steamy. I'm going to let them kind of sit and strain a little bit into my thing first because I want them to be as dry as possible before I put them out on my baking sheet. But these are my Yukon Gold potatoes that we've sliced up and boiled until they're about tender, and we're going to turn them into our smashed potatoes. Let me grab my thing here. We'll turn this on to about a medium, around a 5, and we're going to start sauteing up our onions to get a caramelization, and then we'll add in our green beans, and then we'll cook them. I'm going to put in about a teaspoon and a half of olive oil for this. We're going to let it warm up. We'll put our onions in. Once our onions have caramelized, I'll add a little bit of garlic to that. But we're going to keep them fairly simple. Okay. You can see my lamb chops smell delicious. That sage just pairs really well with the smell of lamb. Like it's just, lamb isn't, as I said, it's a bit more of a gamey meat if you've never had it before. It's not so gamey like some of those other more, exotic meats, but it definitely has a bit more gaminess than beef, but it is really lovely. It's one of those things where when I first introduced my kids to lamb, I didn't think they were going to like it, and they all love it. They love the lamb chops, and then they love what we call lamb lollies, which I typically only do around Easter or special occasions because they're a lot more expensive. But, they're part of the little lamb, like kind of rib rack, and they look like lollies because you leave the bone on, and then you have the little meat disc there. And my kids absolutely, lost an onion, absolutely love them. And I think one time, like, Torrin ate like 7 of them in one sitting. I'm like, you can't eat that many. Those are too pricey. You could enjoy like 3. Okay. Let's get these all broken up. And we'll let those start to caramelize here. And let's get working on our potatoes now. Let me just clear this out of the way. Got our strawberries prepped. My kids we've had a lot of melon and pineapple recently, and I got out, I think last night I got out, before we did our dinner stream last night, I got out raspberries, and I was just like, oh, here, just have a little snack of raspberries or whatnot. They ate the whole 2 or 1 pound pack of raspberries in one sitting, and I was like, oh, you weren't supposed to eat those all now. Okay, we've got them laid out here. I'm going to get a piece of parchment paper to lay on top, and then I'm going to smash them down with my pan. And that's going to make them nice and flat, which will give them just a great crisp on the bottom. And I find just a sheet of this. You don't want to put parchment paper under because, you want that metal to get nice and hot underneath of the baking sheet and crisp them up. But we're just going to do this. It's just going to prevent them from sticking to your pan. And you're just going to smush them down. You could also use a rolling pin or a mug or, a glass or whatnot. But I already have my pan out, so I find it's nice and easy to do it this way because then you can get a good heft behind them. So we've got them nice and smashed. There we go. And I have a couple more that I'll give them a little extra love smash. Those corners. There we go. So have it just like this. And then we're going to spoon our herby butter over. I'm going to check on my lamb chops here. See how they're cooking. They're looking good. Beautiful. Lovely. Perfect. So I'm looking for this nice little thing on them. Now, we're not going to cook them completely through on our stove. We're going to cook them, sear them off. We'll remove them. Then we're going to place them in the oven to finish off for the last 5 minutes of the sourdough cooking. That's going to keep them really juicy and tender. Let's grab our garlic herb butter here. And we're just going to drizzle it over. Just take your spoon and spoon it over. I find it gets more even if you do it with a spoon instead of just trying to pour it. Because what happens when you pour it is you're going to get all of your butter in one spot, but not all of your garlic. So we're going to brush this all over. This is going to crisp up our potatoes and give it, again, a really great flavor. And then we're going to put our Parmesan on here as well. Now you could also throw on some black pepper, really any herbs you wanted. Throw some green onions on here too. Keeping it simple. My kids like it kind of simple. Let's grab. I'm going to use my shaved Parmesan, which really is like little sheets of Parmesan, which I love. You can get this at Costco. Here we go. And it's actually pretty good. It's literally like sheets of Parmesan. So I'm just gonna lay it out here. That way it will kind of melt and crisp up and give you that really crispy edge. Gotta pay the piper here. He loves Parmesan, although I guess I have almost never, grate my own Parmesan, and I grated it for him the other day, and he goes, "Oh, this is so much better than," I was like, the pre-grated. I was like, yeah, when you freshly grate your Parmesan, it's a lot softer and more flavorful. Here we go. Beautiful. So we've got this nice, put a little kind of coating over it, which is why, again, I really like the sheets because they're thin and they'll really crisp up and melt, and they'll just be so much more delicious. Let's see, we can go pop them in the oven right now. I'm gonna give my onions a quick stir real quick. Flip them over. We'll pop them in here. We can sneak a peek at my our sourdough, our cinnamon roll sourdough. This pan is hot because it was boiled potato. Beautiful. So I'm just gonna slide it right over here. Kind of get it not direct, but underneath it. But we've got a good baking up on there. It looks like I have a nice peak. And those potatoes should be done roughly around the same time maybe our sourdough is. Okay. We've got this nice kind of caramelization starting to come up on our onions here. You can see they're getting translucent and a little bit of that kind of brownish color. That's the natural caramelization from the sugar. So it's turning it nice and kind of a golden brown. We're going to pop in our garlic here for our green beans. Just about, a teaspoon, maybe a little less. I just want a little bit of garlic in there to go with the green beans. It doesn't need a whole lot. And this is going to be for our green beans. Then we're going to check our lamb chops. Now remember, our lamb chops, I'll pull these out. We'll put the next ones in, and then we'll finish them off in the oven for them to kind of cook here. So I'm just going to pull them off right now. So these aren't going to be cooked all the way through yet, but we'll finish them off in the oven, and that's but they will continue to cook while they're sitting here. Which is why I always like to start with the fattest ones first, because that's going to allow them to sit longer and cook up more. And then your thinner ones second, especially when you have a large, group of people. There we go. We'll let those saute off. Now our lamb chops are primarily cooked all the way through. Again, we'll pop them in the oven for those last few minutes so that they're nice and kind of perfect. There we go. And give us a little bit of a toss. That garlic smells fantastic. Now let's put in our green beans here. I'm gonna pop them in. I'm gonna just break some of them in half so that they're not so long when we go in there. I just find instead of trying to lay them all out on a cutting board, just as you're throwing them in, just break them in half. It's better than if you have to get the if you ever buy a bag of green beans from the farmer's market where you have to snip the ends and everything. Oh, it's one of my least favorite jobs. I grew green beans once, and that was kind of last time because I'm not a big fan of having to snip off all the ends. It's a very tedious task. There we go. One more. But that's one thing I love. Costco, like you can get, these are like their organic green beans from Costco, and they're such a good steal, and they're actually really well, like they do a good job with them already pre-cleaned and trimmed. So we got our green beans in. We're going to give them a quick toss with our onions, kind of mix them around. And then we're going to put our lid on them and do kind of a steam cook on them, which is going to allow them to get this nice tenderness to it, turn bright green, which helps them cook up a little bit faster. But before we put that lid on, let's get our pork chops or our lamb chops here. I don't know why I want to keep calling it a pork chop. Here we go. Got them halfway. Oops. Beautiful. Turn those up just a smidge. Let me grab my lid out. This is my middle size. Now, that's one thing I do love about the Hexclad. All the Hexclad pans come with a lid, and they have a little steam vent. So when you do put the lid on, they're not going to get too like soggy. It actually lets out a lot of the moisture, but still traps in that heat, so you can do a quick steaming on it for it. Okay. Get our, I think our apple butter here is just about all done here. Look how just thick it is, how it just like falls off of our spoon. That's how long you want to cook it. So I'm going to grab I'll grab a bowl here to transfer it into it. That way we can kind of keep it. You could totally jar it up, but I don't know if this is even going to make it through. I have a feeling all of this is going to get eaten at dinner, but we'll sit it here, let it cool down. But this has been cooking since our lunchtime stream on low in our Dutch oven. Now, the reason I make my apple butter in a Dutch oven instead of like a saucepan is because I really like that slow, gradual temperature that hits it. It prevents it from scalding and really reduces it and keeps it nice and thick and creamy. But just see how thick this is. It's just coating my spoon. This is going to be so delicious on our sourdough bread. And it's hard to believe 5 big apples made that. Check these guys out. Okay, I'm going to tuck these in, and then we're going to put our ones over here, and then we're going to throw these in the oven to kind of saute or cook up with our rest of our food in there.
You have a question? Do the lamb chops have a fat side like pork chops do?
Not really. They have more of a marbling of fat through it, but they do not have that kind of grizzle that you get with pork chops, which is kind of nice. They are fattier meat because, you know, they're really tender, but very, very delicious. Pop this guy off. We're going to go pop this in the oven. In there. I'll check on it. It's delicious. And then I've got to do some stretch and folds on my sourdoughs that I'm prepping up for tomorrow. Good. We've got a perfect 5-minute timer kind of left in here. Let me check a peek at my sourdough. It might even be done already. Sometimes with the cinnamon sugar, you want to keep an eye on it because you don't want it to get too dark for it. But you know what? It's actually looking pretty good. I might take it out now so that peak doesn't get any hotter. We'll leave that timer on for it. The cinnamon in the or the sugar in like a sweet one sometimes can cook a little bit faster. I can caramelize it, so I always like to keep an eye on it. But let's take this out. But it looks gorgeous. We're going to slide it out here. It's nice and hot. Beautiful. So this is our brown sugar cinnamon spice sourdough. You can see we've got that oozing greatness coming out of there. On the side, the cinnamon roll spice on it. We've got our lovely peak and our ridge. It's going to be a fabulous loaf. Okay. So right before we actually did our dinner stream, I prepped up 2 traditional loaves. And if you've ever made sourdough before, you know you've got this press and fold, or the stretch and folds that you've got to do. So I'm going to do those in just a second here while our last of it finishes off. But look how beautiful and vibrant green our green beans are. And that's just steaming them with the lid on for just a few minutes. Now I'm going to finish them off with the lid off to take away some of that moisture, but we're going to add our spices on now. We're going to add in some garlic salt and onion powder. So again, just a good little shake of garlic salt and a little bit of the onion powder. The onion powder is going to help pick up some of that moisture and leave a little bit of a crisper edge on our green beans and adds just a great savory flavor that really sticks to it.
Yeah, but do you prefer to cook on gas or electric?
You know what? I used to always say gas because I grew up with a gas stove. But the last 2 houses that we've owned, our previous house and here, I've all had electric. And honestly, electric is very, very predictable. The heat is, I can set it at low and I know exactly what it is, versus a flame. You kind of have a little bit of variation in how things cooked. So I know it's not a popular opinion, but I actually like electric, especially the oven. I find gas ovens just don't work as well. Now, there are some things that gas does work really well on. If you're going to like do a flame cook, they work great. I'm going to do my first kind of set of stretch and pulls. This is just my traditional sourdough loaf. If you've ever wondered, like, oh, it's such a sticky dough, how do you manage it? The trick is, let's got our first set, is you get your hands wet. And getting your hands wet creates like a non-stick surface. So I literally just come over with wet hands like this, and that's going to allow me to kind of pull up and stretch my dough. And this is what it really makes a difference between a yeast dough and a sourdough. Yeast dough, you need it. With the sourdough, because it's a high hydration dough, you do stretch and folds. And that helps build those gluten chains. And then you do about 4 rounds of stretch and folds every 20 to 30 minutes. So they actually cook up pretty fast, or whip up pretty fast. It's not a lot of work. It's like 30 seconds. And then you do that every day. Okay, let's get this and we'll get our food out.
You have a question? Do you make bread every day?
Not every day, but pretty close to every day. Pretty much every other day, because it takes about a day and a half before a loaf is ready to be made. And you know, I'll make other things like biscuits or focaccia or different types of things. I like to have a grain every day with our meal, but it changes up.
And what's the best way to prevent mold in your starter?
Honestly, is just not neglecting it, keeping it fed every 1 to 3 days. If you're not going to feed it that often, pop it in your fridge. I've had my starters mold before. I forgot to put one on back in January, or in December. We went on vacation, went on a cruise and we're gone for like 10 days, and I forgot to pop it in there, and mine molded. But if you keep it, you know, keep your jar fairly clean, keep the environment thing, and you feed it regularly, that natural fermentation should prevent molding. Okay, let's go grab our potatoes out of the oven, and we should be able, I think our lamb chop should be just about done too. Which is perfect timing because it's about to beep.
A question, have you ever made tamales?
I actually have made tamales. I love them. Now, my one thing with tamales that I'm a little bit biased about is I have a friend who is from Uruguay. And I should say Uruguay because she's like, you're saying it wrong. But her sister makes the best tamales ever. So if I ever want tamales, I'm always like, please, can your sister give me some tamales? They're so good. Because they are amazing, because you've got to have this really fat thing. I'm going to grab my lamb chops now. There we go. And this is nice. So here are our crispy smashed potatoes. You see that when we put that nice flaking of that Parmesan over, it's toasted up and crispy, but still got a good ooze. And then we had that garlic butter over the top of it. And then we have our lamb chops that we finished searing off in the oven. We did most of them we did it prime, we seared off both sides and then we finished them in the oven. Now this is the best part. I always say, once you take them out, flip them over, because see this lovely brownish color? That's the juices of the lamb chops and the seasoning. And I like to make sure it gets coated on both sides because it has such a great flavor. Okay, we're about ready to serve up here, guys. So let me flip these, and then, beautiful. Let's serve up our dinner. Now I got to remember, this is very hot and not to grab it. I have a tendency to grab hot things. Beautiful. Okay, grab our plate. I think we're ready. Yep, he's cooled off enough. We can cut him open, and that way I can spread my apple butter on him, and you guys can see all this deliciousness. Let me grab my bread knife over here. Okay. I'm going to slide this guy over because everything is off. And let's get this guy over, because when you take your bread out of the oven, I would say let it sit 5 to 10 minutes. It's been sitting here for about 7 or 8 now. We're going to cut it open so you guys can see the beautiful swirls and the crumb reveal on this guy. Oh, he got a little bit gooey in there, probably just from our brown sugar in there, but it's going to be delicious. Okay, let's serve up our dinner. And, okay, we've got our beautiful, crispy smashed potatoes with our Parmesan cheese and our garlic butter. We have our lamb chops that are seasoned with sage, Worcestershire, garlic, salt, and just a lovely flavor that really masks that kind of earthiness. Our green beans with our caramelized onions. And then let me grab a nice slice of our, see how soft and wonderful this is? We've got some gooey brown sugar in there, and our apple butter. Look how beautiful this is going to cook along there. Gorgeous. So we've got our cinnamon roll loaf with our apple butter on there for just a perfect touch of sweetness with our dinner here. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made, and you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my hex-clad pans in it, my baking sheets, my knives, all the different gadgets and stuff that I have in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.